Wait! This is Joseph Aleo, the head honcho, the big kahuna, the grand poobah of Vikings vs. Samurai. Let's be honest, as cool as Vikings vs. Samurai is, the premise is ridiculous. Come on, Vikings duking it out with Samurai? That's like saying who would win in a fight, the Hulk or Superman. To help suspend your disbelief so you're along for the ride, I do a lot of research. Right now, I'm knee-deep in 2 gems, Vikings at War by Kim Hjardar and Vegard Vike, and Samurai Arms, Armour, and Tactics of Warfare by Antony Cummins. And these books are a treasure trove of information. Antony, he's a historian with a laser focus on Japanese warfare. He's also the founder of the Historical Ninjutsu Research Team, a crew dedicated to translating and publishing old-school shinobi manuals in English. His work unearths the lost ninja arts, epic samurai sagas, and secrets buried for centuries. So, I hit up Antony with burning questions about what would happen if Vikings faced off with samurai. And you know what he did? He didn't just shoot back an email. Oh, no. The dude recorded his answers as a voice memo. I'll let you in on what he said, but first, let me walk you through what I asked him. 1. Vikings vs. Samurai takes place in the 13th century. What were the precursors to ninja at that time? Because they weren't a thing back then. 2. How would a katana hold up against a Viking sword? 3. What are some advantages and disadvantages a samurai would have fighting a Viking? 4. What would a samurai's strategies and tactics be fighting a Viking force? And 5. The Vikings raid the island of Tsushima. Who would a samurai send amongst them to warn the mainland? Okay, here's Antony's responses.
Okay, Joseph, let's have a look at this. Right, no problem. Don't worry about them being basic questions. I prefer basic questions to be answered because that makes it a more solid thing. Right, here we go. My story takes place in the 13th century. That is not a strange time to have samurai take place, but it's a very early time for the samurai. Obviously, different armour, different society, very Chinese influenced. So you don't get your stereotypical Japanese Zen-esque things. In fact, Zen's not really a major thing at this point in that place. Yeah, it comes over, it's there, but it's not a major factor. It starts to become it, but not quite. We get the word ninja in the 14th century for the first time, or shinobi, basically, for the first time. So what you're looking for is read Sun Tzu's Art of War, the 13th chapter. If you can, use mine, The Ultimate Art of War. That's your best bet, to be fair. That gives it a breakdown of how spies were used. So, was there a sneaking in thing? Yes, probably. But there's no, forget this dressed in black sort of stuff. You want people in normal samurai clothes of the time, sneaking in and out. Don't use the word shinobi. It's a bit too early. But, basically we don't have that much documentation from that time is the simple answer. We have very little. There's artwork, there's Buddhist statues, but actual words with like spy and things don't really come into it that much. So yes, you can do a ninja type thing, but, don't overdo it. How should katana hold up to a Viking sword? Now, that's a difficult one, That's a really, really difficult question. But I would say they're pretty okay. Viking swords are going to be heavier and thicker, I think, even though they're not heavy and thick. Well, they're about 2 pounds, I think. But we do know that katana bent. We know that they chipped. We know they had to be cut down because they cracked. So some swords will break under it. Other swords would not. But if you're in the 13th century, they're using bows and they're using spears way more than they're using swords. So you want to be shooting the Vikings and stabbing them with spears instead of sword so much. What are some advantages and disadvantages samurai would over fighting a Viking? Far more organised. I'm not saying the Vikings weren't organised. I've got some knowledge of the Vikings, but basically you've got a lot of tactics. These are a lot of they're making good fortifications. So if you're in Japan, the fortifications are there. They've got traps, trap fake walls, carts that fall on you, trip wires, loads of stuff around the castle. Spikes in the ground, old broken swords were put in the ground for people to stand on. You got fire tools, fire weapons. They're at sea, they're doing same sort of sea combat stuff. So, the samurai would basically have loads and loads of advantage, I think, over the Vikings in that their military tactics are honed for their homeland. Out in somewhere else, they'd be a bit different, but one-to-one combat, the Vikings are way taller than samurai. Samurai, you're looking at 5 foot, you're looking at 4'10", 4'11" to about 5'2". They are tiny, tiny men. They would literally, a Viking would grab him and pick him up like a bloody dwarf half the time. It'd be no problem. Seeing as that we know Vikings are 5'10", 5'11", so they've got at least a foot on them in height. They'd be really bigger. What would a Japanese army facing a Viking force? Basically, if the Vikings are coming up raiding from villages, they would be totally fortified. They'd have the palisades ready. They'd have, as I said, drawbridge, cart traps. They would have watchtowers going. They'd have rocket signals that would. So basically, the moment a Viking ship come over the horizon, the watchers would start sending up flares, and then that's it. They'd start do a call to arms. The problem you've got in the 13th century is the samurai are too far apart. They don't reckon there's actually a full-on village in Japan that early. Mostly they're small hamlets around. You do get cities, of course, but you don't get the middle area density. You get a lot of the Vikings would have to trundle all the way up to the farmlands to try and find a really small settlement that robbing probably wouldn't be worth it, and they'd easily murder everyone inside. But what would they do? So normally samurai, they use jimbari. No, that's wrong. Oh no, sorry, I forgot the Japanese word. Oh my god, it's left my head. But anyway, basically orders for war, they send them out and the samurai come in over a few weeks and then they go to war. So it's not quite quick, get up and get out. Usually they live in scattered hamlets. The Vikings raid the island of Tsushima. Who would samurai send amongst them to warn the mainland? So I'm not quite sure what you mean, but who would samurai send to warn the mainland? Well, usually fire rockets. It's just like that would go up, right, okay, that's a signal. There is possibly a use of pigeons and birds, but most likely they would send a messenger, skyban, which is a messenger which would be sent on they're high-ranking samurai, basically. So your high-ranking samurai are sent to send messages because they are trustworthy, intellectual, and if there needs to be spying done or any code work or code breaking, they are sent. I hope that helps, mate. No problem, Joseph. I really like the artwork. It's superb. It's very, very good. I'm looking forward to seeing some of it in there. And, oh, by the way, that you are literally on time. I am going on the 30th. I'm going to I'm going to a mate's house to film a YouTube video. He's got a bigger channel than I have, and it will be out mid-June. So by mid-June, this time next month, you're going to have exactly Vikings v Samurai, the documentary, for about an hour, maybe 45 minutes, something like that, come out of one of our channels.
Thanks, Anthony, for helping me out. You did me a solid. If you want to keep up with Anthony's research, hit up his site at anthonycummins.com. And don't sleep on his YouTube channel. Just punch in Samurai and Ninja History with Antony Cummins. Before I blow this joint, mark your calendars. The next issue of Vikings vs. Samurai drops Wednesday, May 22nd. It's a yarn called Igor and Shoujo Hoist a Few, penned by my pal, Paul DiFilippo. Sign up for our monthly newsletter at vikingsvssamurai.com and never miss a blood-soaked issue. That's vikingsvssamurai.com. While you're there, check out Anthony's books that we talked about today. I've also got a list of his other books that you just might dig. You can find us on Blue Sky, Mastodon, Threads, and X. We're always within reach. And the handle's the same everywhere. Vikings vs. Samurai. That's Vikings vs. Samurai. All right, I'm out.